Well, today I'm hoping to potentially have one of the most enlightening conversations that we've had on this podcast in forever or just a long time. And that is maybe a promise. I think that we're all going to learn a little something here that is so unique and so fascinating. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this. So, just as a quick little background, I've been looking into this idea called nested observer windows and the now model, which basically hopes to describe what a healthy mind, what a healthy consciousness kind of looks like. And we have Alysha here on the podcast who has extensive training now in one specific part of this model, but I do want to give the background to everyone. And first, I'll introduce the idea of waking up in the morning. And I think it's such a universal experience that when we wake up in the morning, we know that it's super hard to get out of bed, right? You're sitting there or you're laying there and you're thinking, I really have to get up. I got a lot of work today to do. But also, this bed is so comfy. And also, I could maybe snooze another 20 minutes. And also, does it really matter if I get my work done today? And also, I probably shouldn't be lazy. And it's interesting because this scenario depicts the exact functionality of our brain in many ways, is that we almost experience things on a unitary level. Like things feel almost as if it's a song and it's playing all at once in this kind of unified stream of experience. Yet it's also very clear to us that there are many different parts of ourselves saying different things at the same time. Is that fair to say?
Definitely.
Yeah. And so this model, the now model, and what Alysha is going to discuss, the IFS, internal family systems model, basically helps us understand how our minds work on this functional level. And I wanted to bring this kind of scientific background to it because I think that it gets hard when we're talking about how the mind works because we don't have all the answers. But luckily, this model proposed by Jonathan Schooler, who is just an absolute phenom in this realm of memory, emotion, thoughts, and awareness. In fact, he works at the Meta Lab, which stands for exactly that. He's done hundreds and hundreds of thousands of research studies and articles on how the mind works. And this is his newest model. Him and a guy named Riddler kind of proposed this model, and we'll have to I'll link the paper in the description of this episode so that you guys can read it. But basically, the point of this is that he proposes that consciousness is hierarchical. So we have this outer apex layer, which is experienced by us. So this is the layer that we live on, right? But consciousness is also made of these underlying kind of nested observer windows. And so I guess a good analogy to think about would be like the Russian stacking dolls. So we live on the most outer layer. This is where our experience happens. Yet we also have parts of us and parts of the brains, whether that's brain regions or neurons or whatever scale they come on, that are in smaller levels. And these are all communicating with each other. They're all doing individual work. They're all experiencing something and then basically passing messages up. So, our visual systems, our tiny little neurons, they're picking up information and they're sending it up almost as if you can imagine like a factory too, and the individual like line workers are doing their task kind of automatically, like putting, I don't know, like things in a box. And then there's a manager level above that says, I'm going to direct this portion of workers, and then another manager is going to direct this portion of workers. And then we have like a director level, which directs the managers. And then we have another level at the apex, which is maybe like the CEO or the owner, whoever, who kind of sends information down. The cool thing about this model is it kind of explains a lot of functional experiential elements of the brain that we encounter on an everyday basis. And so I kind of want to stop there because I think it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to break down. But what are our thoughts so far on this? And then we'll get into Alysha's IFS model.
My thoughts?
Sure.
Okay, we'll go with my thoughts. Great job explaining it. This is the first time I've heard of it, other than like 5 minutes before we started. This is the way we roll, which I think is super valuable for me. And thank you. Interesting that I think we feel it. I think I can feel what you're saying to me. Like, I feel like sometimes I have my subconscious things that are like happening, that those are those little workers. And then I can feel like, I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that. So I'm going to push that aside. And then maybe like there's another part of me that's like, no, even though you don't agree with that, we should still do it. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think these are all like kind of translated to me through my body and my mind as individual thoughts. Right? And when I say I don't know where my thoughts come from, like sometimes you do. Sometimes you're like, oh, that hurt. Okay, stop doing that. Oh, okay. No, I have to push through. I have to do it anyway. It's like that type of stuff. So it does make sense to me. This concept of like the CEO, or that like we're observing it all from the CEO level, makes sense to me too, because that makes me feel like me. Like, okay, I get this all. If I am the factory, like all of that's happening inside of me. All of this is happening and the thoughts are coming, but they're coming from signals and they're coming from information. And eventually they get to me, the me that's making this discussion with you right now. And I kind of put it all together and package it all up and say, okay, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. We can move forward. Mm-hmm. That's what I got out of it. Mm-hmm. And I do think it's funny that they call it the now model. Mm-hmm. Because you have to be kind of open-minded to even really think about this stuff.
Yeah. And what's super cool about it is that if we understand the brain in the mind as having natural tension that then can be resolved and heard, then that opens up a different way of thinking about how we communicate, not only to ourselves, but how we hear ourselves, how we manage our emotions, how we manage that conflict that happens between parts of us and competing motives, essentially. And this is why Alysha is going to be so super valuable, because the now model talks about the fundamental components of the brain's conscious awareness, I guess, and how it's entirely possible from a biological or neurobiologic standpoint that there are different experiences happening at the same time that then are translated up to this higher window. So the scientific model behind this, I think, is very compelling and strong. But what's even more useful for the average person, I think, is looking at how do we actually then work with ourselves to resolve ambivalence, to change, to feel better. And Alysha, like I said, Alysha's been doing extensive, like this training is legit. And I don't know how many hours a week, but how many hours a week for a year long, just like constant training. And she put in a ton of work with this internal family systems model. And she's a level 1 certified.
Give us a IFS informed coach through the Institute of Healing and Awakening. So, yes, I learned from them. The model was originally made by Dick Schwartz. and he's the founder of this model. It's really a personal development model, and it's a therapeutic modality, and it's really, really interesting. And Ryan told me about this now theory last week, and I was just so excited because I was like, this aligns with IFS so much, with science. I absolutely love this, seeing that intersection. And I think just kind of maybe starting, because IFS is a bit complex, so I think maybe just starting with maybe explaining the premise a little bit, and then love to just kind of answer questions as they come. So when Ryan was talking about kind of these nested observer windows, and in IFS language, we would call those parts. So the premise of IFS is that we all have parts of us, and these parts help us interact in the world and exist in the world, and they develop throughout our lives. And when, life is hard, so things are going to happen to you throughout life, and sometimes things will happen and it will cause like a fracture where a part might get injured or it might experience a difficult emotion. And all parts try to protect us. So if there's a part that's holding pain, our system will push it down and try to hide it so that we don't have to deal with the pain. So there's these parts called exiles, or these hurt parts. They're often young. They're not always young. We can develop them later in life. And our entire consciousness is based around protecting these young hurt parts. So we have these young ones, and then we have these managers. And our managers, we all have managers, and they might look like critics, perfectionists, using alcohol or drugs, like doing things to distract or to manage things to make sure that whatever happens, these young parts don't get triggered and poked, and all this emotion is going to spill out. So that's kind of the premise, is kind of we have these different parts of ourselves. And with the model, what we can do is we really want to get to know and understand each part. And once we understand what it's doing, we can have more compassion for it, and then be able to really give it what it needs and heal in that way, essentially. It's way more complex than that, but that's just a start.
I love it. And I think it's so interesting because, we're about to have this, conversation that Alysha and I haven't really even had yet about how these models coalesce, and also just to kind of uncover a little bit more about how we actually navigate situations. How do we navigate interpersonal relationships? How do we navigate change? How do we navigate feeling better, essentially? How do we improve our quality of life? And one of the coolest things about IFS is that it's I would say it's relatively unknown, I think, in the public. I think a lot of people who work in a field like us, whether it's dietitians working on the behavioral front or therapists, obviously, I think they understand that it makes sense. And what's the most interesting thing that Alysha had said to me about it, that grasped my attention when I started noticing, was that we speak about parts of ourselves intuitively. How many when she brought it up to me, then I'm like talking with clients, and they always say, one part of me says this and one part of me says that. And there is this tension that I think is supernatural, yet we judge. And that in both models is a problem. We have these different kinds of parts of ourselves. They're saying valid things that, to Alysha's point, maybe like is protecting, or, they have a say. But when we push a part down and we say, well, I don't want to hear that. And, you can almost bring it back to the factory example. If a worker comes up and says, hey, I have a big problem, and the manager's like, no, you don't, get back to work, chump. That's a problem. And that probably causes greater tension than hearing it out anyways. Because, think about yourself. Do you want your boss to take your exact complaint or rant and like make widespread changes? Probably not. You probably just want to be heard, and then have that piece of information that you provided as a part of the decision making process. No one wants that responsibility anyways of the latter or the former.
And it's interesting because you just brought up the example, like if we have a tension, we might then kind of get upset about it. That's just a third part. That's a third part now judging the tension. They pop up all over the place. And the cool thing is, like, before doing this work, like you said, it's intuitive. A part of me wants this, a part of me wants that, but we don't really know how to, get in there and understand it. And so think of it like this, like we have all these parts all the time. And when one gets activated, it kind of blends with your seat of awareness. So let's say something happens and you get like rage angry. And all of a sudden you're super, super angry. You're blended with this part holding anger. And in that moment, if there's no space, you probably don't even know that you're blended with it because you are it now, right? So when these parts come in really strong and you blend with them, you become them. So what IFS does is it helps you learn to identify when that's happening, create space. And the big concept, which I haven't mentioned yet, which is very important, is finding presence and self-energy. So say we're really, really angry. We have this angry part come in. If we're able to create a little bit of space from it and hold it in this place of self-energy, we can then understand it. Why is it getting so angry? What does it need? What is it actually telling us? And then we can provide it with that. Like, for example, I was working with a client yesterday and he was telling me, I've been getting really angry all the time for no reason. So we dived into it a little bit. We did some parts work. We did some IFS. And what we found out was the angry part comes in if he feels like he's not being heard, and it helps him express himself. And then as soon as we came to that conclusion, he was like, oh, I have some more compassion towards this anger now. And now that we know it's there, now we can work with it when it pops in. So it's a very, very cool thing.
I'm hearing both of you, and I'm not stuck, but I keep using the analogy that you've created for me of the factory and myself sitting in the top of this big open floor, literally looking out the window and seeing the different parts all trying to accomplish their goal, our collective goal of like having a healthy, happy life, and recognizing it within myself that there are parts of me that I will intentionally shut down or push away. And then there's almost like these like mediator parts that come in and they're like, maybe we should do less of that and more of this. And then I can kind of see all of these analysis. I'm seeing this conversation literally right now through the lens of this factory and me being up at the top, and then almost sometimes looking away and not even looking down there and be like, everything's fine, everything's fine, nothing's on fire at all.
Yeah.
I'm gonna that's probably my superpower, right? Like nothing's on fire, and then one of these parts makes it up to here, and now I'm freaking out or upset with everybody, or so the analogy just keeps hitting home for both sides, like the IFS and this kind of like now model for me. So if anybody's listening that is feeling that same way, I hope you are, because you guys are doing a great job of going forward with it. So let's talk a little bit more about what you meant when you said, like, when you understand it, when you recognize it, making space for it, or creating space from it. Like, what does that mean? Like, how would we do that when we, let's say you're in a scenario like mine right now, where there's someone in my life that is just, every time I see them, I'm just like, I want to avoid them. I want to walk away from them. I want to go in the other direction from them. And in my head, I'm keep saying, or I want to go over there and confront them and just say, you're all these things that make me brah.
All the parts coming out, yeah.
Right. So how do I make space from that? Or how do I, how do we act as the CEO and make a decision that makes sense to the rest of the body without just pushing it down and being like, I'll deal with that next week or tomorrow or some other time?
Absolutely. So that's when we want to connect with self and utilize presence. And I'm going to give you some tangible information about how to do that, but I want to start first with explaining a little bit more what self is, because that's like the critical element. So self is a space, and you're a meditator, right? So when you get to like a meditative state where everything feels clear and quiet, and you can hear kind of what's happening more from an intuitive state versus like thoughts and worries, right? That's self-energy. Self-energy is calm, it's clear, it's confident, courageous. It is curious, compassionate. There's these 8 C words, which self-energy is, and every single human has it. The thing is that, when things happen in your life and, these parts are created, a lot of times these parts don't believe self-energy exists. So they have to do their job in the way they think is better to, make up for self, because there is no self. So when you're in a spot where you just gave a situation where you were blending with multiple parts, right? Parts were coming in, I'm going to shove it away, I'm going to confront them, I'm going to, like all this like emotional turmoil. And in that moment, we want to recognize contraction in the body, because every time a part is present, it's present with a contraction. When you're in a deep meditative state, there's no contraction. Your body's relaxed. Things are flowing. When a part comes in, your heart might get really tight all of a sudden, or you might notice your jaws are really tight. Like, these are our physical, tangible cues that a part is here.
Okay, so hold on before you go any further. So I was laying in bed a couple nights ago, and all the parts were talking to me because I was focused on it, or I don't know, whatever the reason was. And I went, ugh, and I like, and Corey was like, what was that? It was visible.
Yes.
and my response, of course, was nothing.
That was another part. He's like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, like not going to share that, because that was all the things.
Yeah.
And I felt like all I would do is like put it on her, kind of like, and I think we won't get any further. But essentially what you're saying, I have a visible, very interesting memory of that only happened like a week ago.
Yeah, it's very tangible. So at this point, if my heart is tight, I pause and recognize that nothing that I'm thinking or feeling is aligned with me. It's aligned with a part. And that knowledge gives like confidence, just like okay. I might feel really scared right now, but that doesn't mean that there's actual danger, because I'm in a contracted state. There's a part present. I need to, resume self. And there's a couple different methods you can do this, and they really are presence. Guthrie, who my mentor who trained me, one of the things that he likes to do, it's this little 4-piece thing called ground, core, field, focus. And whenever you feel your energy getting, congested with parts, you kind of stop, pause, ground, visualize all your energy pulling down into the ground, feel your seat in the chair, connect within your body, kind of get in your body. Core, feel the space between the top of your head and the bottom of your tailbone. What's going on within me? Are there contractions here? What's going on there? No judgment, just what is there. Just feel it, connect with it. Field, the air around you. We live in energy. Like, science shows this. This isn't fake. It's real. There's energy all around us. And when you connect to the energy around you, you can feel the energy of what's happening. And then focusing back in on what you're now doing. There's another one that's not part of ground, core, field, focus that actually my favorite one. This is one I actually learned how to do myself in Peru before I even, learned about IFS, is heart. And that's just opening your heart. So, when I was talking about that tight heart feeling, we feel that and going, okay, open the heart. And then when all of those things align, the energy is clear and you're in a self space. And now you can hold the parts. A part can come in that's sad and you can hold it. You can hold the sadness without becoming the sadness. And that's how you heal it.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. And I think that's, kind of what we mean when we say like make space, right? Because you call it you called it fuse with a part?
Blended
with a part. All the previous conversations we've had on self-awareness and emotional intelligence and all the things is that they align perfectly with these models, right? And, IFS is interesting because they have a lot of specific language, which I guess for all intents and purposes, you could interchange freely, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But their way of explaining it, I think, makes sense. Like the blended and the parts, and then they use terms like managers and whatever. Again, I'm not like an expert by any means. I just take in information from Alysha by osmosis. But the way that they describe it is helpful because it's nice to have a little bit of a model so that you can then impart that model and say, oh, that's my manager, oh, that's my whatever, that's an exile. You can kind of use the language to help you, but I think it's fascinating and using this. I actually see it being used because Alysha's she's such a big fan of it and she's so well trained in it. I see it used. She does it with herself, and now she'll have conversations with me and she'll say things along the lines of, ooh, a part of me is feeling this way. You know, it's super cool. It's not only cool for the person to feel that whatever they're experiencing in the moment is okay, and it's part of this physiologic, emotional body that isn't exactly them. You know, in the worker factory analogy, we have a line worker who's throwing a fit, lighting the conveyor belt on fire. That's not me. That's not the CEO who's like doing that. I'm observing that, and I could. You know, I think for all intents and purposes, sometimes we go down there and then we're in the fire, and that's when we would be blended. We'd be so consumed by the fact that this worker is whatever, he's throwing a fit. But if we can kind of stay in your, you know, in your higher realm and just observe it and separate from that, that is such a helpful way of thinking about ourselves as a whole. And so she'll say things along the lines, oh, a part of me is feeling anger over this kind of whatever. And like I said, it's not only useful for her to objectify that, but it's also useful for me to see that objectified, because then if she's not blended with it, then I don't have to worry about hurting her feelings. I'm hurting her little worker's feelings if I do say something hurtful or whatever. You know, so it's not like I have to walk on eggshells because she's recognizing that it's just a feeling, and then I'm recognizing as a byproduct that it's just a feeling. And so it makes conversations a lot easier.
Yeah.
Harder conversations become much easier when you can navigate it from a very objectified model.
And it's really cool too, because when, let's say, like taking like a part that you know, an emotion gets activated, it's not right now that's happening. It's the past version. So let's say we have like, I don't know, like an 8-year-old part, you know, that experienced shame, right? And something happens in your life that triggers that feeling, and that part gets activated, right? This young part of you, if it's 8 years old, it might still think you're 8 years old. It doesn't know who you are. It doesn't know, you know, what you've accomplished. It doesn't know anything about you in your later years. So it's reacting like an 8-year-old would react, with no resources, with not a lot of confidence. And when, you know, in these moments when you're connecting with it, what you get to do is you get to have a conversation with it and update it. So sometimes, you know, we'll be working with, a lot of times when you're doing IFS, you actually have your eyes closed, not the coach, but the clients. You might just kind of be sitting there with your eyes closed, connecting with this part. And I'll be like, I'm just going to send it some updates. Okay, I'm 32. This is the spot that I'm in. Oh, you know what? I actually have done a lot of good things. And you share it with this young version of you. And sometimes when that's happening, you actually, like within the inner world, because this work happens within the inner world through visuals, emotions, colors, it's actually very cool. You can kind of see things happening. You might see this little image of this 8-year-old girl like literally grow up while you're talking to her, because she's healing right in front of you. It's a very, very, very cool thing to just watch others go through and to experience yourself.
I love the words you guys are using, and I feel like the words are carrying so much weight with me because they're so normal. We're not talking about this like ancillary thing that like you got to learn a new language. You guys are using words that people use all the time. And part of me is upset. Like, I'm not really upset, but part of me is upset. Like, that's a good, like, step into the world, right? Like, and those are the exact words you're using. Like, and to Ryan's point, like about how sometimes we may open, to go back to kind of this like now model, sometimes we may open this other window and look down there and see that person, you know, lighting it on fire, and like go down there, and it kind of like makes sense to me, like why now you'd have anger, right? Like, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Like, why? Like in that, but if you're not be able to create space and it's all, you look at it as all you, now you're angry at you instead of being angry at this, like, you know, for our example, this line worker that's essentially just having a bad day.
We also want to check in with the line working part. We can just call it that. We label them anyway. And we're like, why are you upset?
Right.
What is causing the upset? Where did that come from? What are you actually trying to accomplish? And the big thing too is like, I think I do want to take a second to just kind of explain a little bit of the 3 main types of parts, because it does make a big difference. So we talked a little bit about the exiles, these young parts that are holding difficult emotions. They don't have jobs. They're basically like these, they're not always sad, but sometimes they're sad. These parts, they're just shoved down into the system and like exiled away from everybody else. And then we have 2 types of protectors. We have managers and we have firefighters. a lot of times they don't like each other. And even though they a lot of times have similar goals, but managers are planning, and they plan all in advance to make sure, okay, this part holding shame down here that we don't want to interact with. Okay, let's do this and this and this and this. We'll do this perfectly, all these things. Okay, we have all this in place. This one's not going to get hurt. All right, good, right? So we have managers doing things like that. And then we have firefighters who have the opposite tactic. Firefighters don't plan, they're reactionary. Say the manager is doing the job and it doesn't quite go right and the shame comes out, the firefighter goes, oh, well, we're stopping that right now. We're drinking. And like it just comes in and it doesn't care about consequences. It doesn't think about the future. It just puts the fire out right now because that shame is unbearable. So what do we do in this situation? We don't want to get mad at the one who's drinking because it's trying to help. It's trying to keep the shame away. What we want to do is we want to go to the shame. We want to go to the young one, witness it, unburden it, and really solve the shame. And then these two protectors, the manager and the firefighter, they can have new jobs. They can do different things because if they're not burdened with these jobs, they can have better jobs. Like a lot of times, like a critical part that might be really mean to you, like, oh, you should be better at this, you should be better at that. It's often just trying to get you to perform well, but from a place of fear. If you transform that manager, a lot of times it can become your cheerleader. Like I used to have a really strong critic. Ryan knows, right? A really strong critic. And this one has turned into a cheerleader. It's like, yeah, Alysha, we can do it. We can do anything. I literally hear that running through my head now. And that never was in there before. And that was because I did work with that manager to really transform its role. And now it supports me in a way that just works better.
Okay. So a couple things backing up again as the audience. No, it's perfect. But as the audience, and I kind of consider myself the audience here because I'm learning right along with the audience. So as the audience, a couple of things that I want to make sure everybody's honed on. This is happening for everybody.
Oh, yes.
We're all in this together in some regard. Like this, your analogy, like if you want to add a different analogy, you can add whatever analogy you want. But this is happening for all of us. Mm-hmm. And I think that's super important to remember because we always, like, you're using words like shame and it's what's the word I'm looking for? Proud of you for using words like shame, right? Like some of us don't admit that there's shame in there. And now as the audience, I want us all to start to think about this for a second. Like, okay, that's there. Second thing, you said like you had a big critic and you worked with it, mm-hmm. right? So you did kind of the work you just talked about, but like talk to the audience a little bit about like what that looks like. And it's not just going to be a one-time thing, right? You don't just bring a worker bee into your office and sit down with it and go, you do better. And they go, okay. And then the next day they're the perfect manager, right? I imagine there's some level of like coaching and consideration and I don't know, like 90-day plan, right? How do you get that manager to go from shielding you or that firefighter to go from throwing all the fire to kind of working through to become a cheerleader? Yeah.
It really depends on the part because sometimes, every once in a while, one conversation does flip things, especially with managers. With exiles and, some stronger level managers, yeah, sometimes it does take some multiple conversations. The biggest thing is just like getting to know it. And I'm just going to bring up an example because it keeps coming to me intuitively of, one of the ones that I worked with a lot when I struggled with my eating disorder was a binge eating part. And I always hated there was another part that hated the binge eating part. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And, I recognized over time, even before I knew the IFS model, I recognized that the binge eating part was feeling restricted and it was feeling like its freedom was getting taken away. I could feel it here. I started recognizing what it looked like. And what I started doing was every time I felt that sensation in my chest, it was like this urgency, I stopped and I told it, we can eat whatever we want. We just want to feel comfortable. I told basically we are free. We can eat what we want. And it was so interesting because as soon as, it gets that information that we actually do have freedom, we don't need to be restricted, you can literally feel it relax. It relaxes within your body. So that one took some time because it would still pop up every once in a while. And I would just remind it like, we're good. Like we just want to do what feels good for us. And over time, that just doesn't pop up for me anymore. So you can do it on your own like that. When you're doing it in like a formal session, when you're working with somebody, you start with usually them coming up with a part of me feels this, a part of me feels that. Okay. Then what we do is we kind of start diving into that specific part and start asking it questions. And in the process, a lot of times, it almost never is that you talk to one part because other parts always have input. So while you're talking to one part, other parts will come in. Oh, what do you have a message for us? And we start communicating with all of them, all of these managers. And then once the managers who are guarding the hurt part that we're kind of leaning towards give us permission, then they actually present the exile to us. And that's when we can heal that underlying one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super interesting. And thanks for sharing that. That kind of real experience where, again, people who work and specifically like on mental health field, obviously we work with a lot of people with eating disorders who struggle with that. And it's really hard to say that any eating disorder starts with malicious intents. I mean, you can see that naturally. People who don't even who are just in the field, but maybe who don't dive into this kind of thought, they understand that. I have someone who I'm working with who they were heavy restrictors, like anorexia type, and then started binging because it literally saved their life.
Yes.
Right. And not to mention that binging is also like a very natural physiologic response to that. But I think on an emotional level, they identified and enmeshed themselves with the idea, the true fact that binging did save their life. It brought them from super malnourished to a better spot.
Mm-hmm.
And then trying to navigate through this behavior that then saves their life is exceptionally complicated. You see the same thing with like alcoholics, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one starts drinking because like I want to die essentially. And even if that is the one underlying part of them, I want to die, so I'm going to start drinking. What is the I want to die part kind of saying? I'm very hurt. Life is very hard. I'm not being heard, whatever it is. And so I think it's super interesting. And, one of the things that the John Schooler and the Now model talks about is this idea of coherence. And coherence would be not that your parts or that your observer windows are communicating the same thing, not that every part is in agreement, not that every little factory worker thinks that everyone's doing a great job, you're all doing everything right. It's not that, because in fact you want parts of yourself to say different things so that those parts can bring it up to the self or the apex window. The CEO can hear all the parts and say, what's a good call here? And they can think about it, they can reflect, and then they can make a decision, essentially. The thing is that we lack coherence, meaning that oftentimes our parts are not communicating effectively in passing the messages up, essentially. So you want to hear all the workers. You want all the workers to bring their concerns up to the managers. You want all the managers to bring their concerns up to the directors. You want all the directors to bring their concerns up to the CEO, the apex window, and then you want the apex window, the self, the whatever, the you experienced you. You want that to see everything and make a good, informed, slow, rational decision, right action, right? And the thing about it is that life creates a discordance of incoherence, because stress and urgency and whatever events create this lack of coherence that then, I guess, inhibits your parts from communicating up effectively and down effectively too, right? Because that's, an intention would just be like, the CEO saying, I want to do this, and then passing that down the levels, right? So I think it's very interesting how you bring up how that lack of coherence, the exile being a part of you that is just not being heard.
Not at all.
And if parts need to shout to be heard, then that's lack of coherence. They shouldn't have to shout. They should just be at the roundtable discussion. Like, what do you think?
I love how you just said roundtable discussion, because that's one of the techniques that we use when there's a lot of protectors popping in. They keep one after another keeps popping in. Well, let's join our roundtable of consultants. And, we can keep working with this one. And if any of you need to jump in, you can, because we really want to respect each part. And every single time a part has something to say, it's important. And I don't think I mentioned this yet, but all parts are good. Every single part in the system is good. It all has, even the parts that you'd think like a suicidal part is negative. It's usually trying to just end pain and protect in that way, So every single part has a good intention, even if its method doesn't seem like it's helpful. And one other thing that kind of jumping off a little bit of what you were just stating, there's a 9th C that the training that I did talks about, which is choice. And the biggest thing here is if parts are unhealed, they don't have a choice. When they're healed, they can do similar things, but they have a choice. So, for example, like taking binge eating for an example, if somebody gets to a state where their firefighter kicks in and they binge eat because that part's not healed and there's all these things going on, like they have no choice. Like they will binge eat, right? And then a lot of times people will beat themselves up for it, not recognizing that, that part doesn't have a choice right now because it's unhealed. When you heal it, it now has a choice. When it's coming from the self energy, it has a choice. What would I like to do? Which thing am I going to choose? And that's the whole goal, is to get to a point where the parts have a choice about how to act.
Wild, because not stupid, but this analogy is so like fitting, right? Mm-hmm. What do you want as someone who's running a company? Like, what do you want your director to do? You want them to make good decisions that you don't have to be involved in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And if the people that are working for them, the parts that are working for them, the windows that you're looking through are working effectively, then that director is making good decisions. And you're kind of like, all right, cool, we got that one. Now moving over to the parts that are challenged or need some extra attention. Mm-hmm. And that's an analogy. I don't know. Did you come up with the analogy?
Maybe.
I think you did.
Yeah, I might have.
Well done.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it's not like mine alone. I'm sure there are. I mean, to me, it seems like a very obvious analogy, and the kind of like business idea makes good sense. Maybe just because, I don't know, that's what we think about, as guys, I suppose. But yeah, I think it's super cool that a lot of the ideas from someone who knows business might be able to apply it to their minds and say, well, that makes perfect sense, such as not everyone has to communicate, not everyone has to agree on the same things. In fact, if you had a business where everyone was a yes man, that's terrible. That's what happened to like Exxon or something, didn't they? Everyone was a yes man and then they blew up because they were all hiding things, right? And so you just need the levels, every different part of that business to communicate effectively. What is that would be the best case scenario for any business. Not that everyone is like happy-go-lucky and, all aligned, but you want them to share their information, bring it up, and then the director, the apex level, the self-energy, they're all the same thing. You want that to be slow. You need it to be kind of rational. And in fact, in this now model, they argue that as you move up the structure, essentially, as the nesting dolls become bigger and bigger and bigger, they do move slower. And so that's why our actual like self, our apex window is pretty slow comparatively. Like our reaction speed is not very super fast, right? Obviously, like heartbeats and muscle twitches and all that stuff is so much faster than what we can even comprehend up here, because that window has a time frame that it operates on. And so you want that larger time frame to at least have all the information there so that I can make a nice, rational, inclusive decision. And that's kind of what like IFS is saying, is that you want the parts to communicate well with each other. You don't want one part too loud, one part too quiet. You want them all to just address your concerns, bring that up. And then you, as a self, can say, good concern. Oh, that one has a good concern too. Let's now move forward with this. And then everyone's like, wow, I was heard. That's a great decision.
Yeah, I mean, there's another analogy I really like too, of like a symphony. So if you're listening to a symphony, I just always have this image in my head of like a symphony, and like there's this self energy coming out of the symphony, and all the music is playing all together, and it's coherent and it makes sense. And then when a part gets activated, it's like a trumpet. It's like, it's like, whoa, we're out of tune here. And what's happening is, the part is not trusting the self energy. It's not trusting the symphony. It thinks it can do a better job.
Or the conductor maybe is the self energy.
A conductor,
Yeah.
Perfect, conducting the self energy. And then it's like, okay, this part that's out of tune, something's wrong. What does it need? Oh, it needs a little reassurance that it's loved. Okay, I'm going to send you some love. Back to the symphony, right? And that's kind of what it's like. It's they are all trusting self. So let's look at it like this. They're all trusting the CEO to lead. When every part trusts the CEO to lead, everything goes smoothly because the CEO as self is connected to everything around. It's connected to everything in reality. It's not being triggered by the internal wounds of the past because it's presence. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that analogy too. Yeah, it's very similar, right? It's like if the even micro parts of that, the instruments themselves would be these parts, these windows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the little like I don't know, of a trumpet, the little keys of a trumpet are also these like windows that are deeper down. And so yeah, it's very interesting. Even John Schooler, who runs this all these things, he's a fascinating individual, and I was listening to him talk on this exact subject, and he said that it is entirely possible that those little tiny observer windows, the keys on a trumpet, the neural cells in the brain, those might be themselves conscious, just at a different level, right? And if we can assume that each level working up is conscious and then leads into this like apex window where we experience consciousness that is like clearly at a higher level, right? And we also can intuitively assume this, right? Like you look at like a dog who is conscious, but maybe less so than us in some way that's like not really like explainable, right? Because we don't understand enough of it. Then he says we can also maybe assume that our level is still nested within other higher planes of consciousness, which is another cool thing, that like the universe maybe is, more conscious than us, and the galaxy is more conscious than that, and so on and so forth. And I find that is very interesting because there's all these other models that, kind of say, well, you don't have free will or this or that or whatever we do doesn't matter, like a more nihilistic kind of thing. When in fact, I mean, it kind of does, because in the symphony analogy, it does matter if someone doesn't play the right notes or doesn't or plays so out of tune because they're just, I don't know, I don't want to play this, and they play something completely different. It does throw off the symphony as a whole. And so it's kind of nice to think about that, that if we can heal ourselves and we can bring compassion to all these different parts of ourselves, and we get into this like kind of concordant kind of feeling, then maybe we're doing our part in the greater universe in a way that is actually very meaningful.
Yeah, that's exactly how it feels.
Yeah. I have a question, MJ. I don't know if you could say no, but what about a little IFS right now?
For me?
Yeah. Would you do a little?
I'd be willing to do it.
And if your parts don't want us to, then we won't.
So I'll start with this. As you guys were talking, I was thinking about two things. One, like this is a journal exercise. That this is what I was thinking about doing for myself. Anyways, was part of me is feeling this way on the top line and then on the bottom line, and it's okay. But I think those, like the middle is what I think you guys are going to attempt to get at here. So I was actually thinking about doing that as an exercise, just because why not, right? This is something that is new to me. I'm learning about it. It lines up so perfectly. Yeah. Like, I mean, Ryan and I just did an episode, 2 weeks ago, that maybe hasn't even aired yet, about how when we talk about feelings or emotions or hunger or like intuition. Like we use the right words. We already do. Like
Mhm.
I'm feeling this way. It's an actual feeling, but we like, no, it's not a feeling. It's a thing. It's something else, right? Like I want, I'm this, I'm that. And like, now we're just using another analogy. Essentially, we're using a scientific analogy. We're using almost like an energy, and like, but it's all just, they're just analogies to get at the same thing.
Mhm.
And I'd be, let's do it.
Well, to first kind of ground a little bit, kind of just relax your body, focus on your seat in the chair. Notice any contractions within your body. And just let them be the way that they are. Look at them with some curiosity. And just if anything is coming up for you that, as an emotion, or if there's any situation where you have parts of yourself in conflict, any of those things can work to start.
I've been recently, not very recently actually, but consistently over time, been greeted with a feeling that lives in my rib, like just south of my heart,
Mm-hmm.
and stretching and working through it, and even like the medical system keeps telling me that everything's fine. But as we're starting to work through this, and I'm starting to think about how good I am at pushing my emotions down, that's what came up to me for me right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What is the sensation like? Like describe it a little bit more.
Like a balloon that is like a long balloon that someone like spun. So it's like became two balloons. Does that make any sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's like that.
Yeah. How are you feeling towards that sensation in your body?
Well, I get angry with it because I feel like something about me feels like I did it to myself, or I brought it on myself, or I hurt myself.
Mm-hmm. So that shows that we have another part that's here that has holding some anger. Where do you feel that one in or around your body?
Mm-hmm. I'm not really sure where I feel the anger when I feel angry. Almost maybe up through like my neck and like upper back. I feel like really tense and like when I feel angry like that.
Yeah. Do you think the part that has some anger about this first sensation would be willing to give us a little space to explore this initial part and just letting it know that we're not trying to empower it, we're just trying to understand it?
I'm willing to try.
Yeah, and if it needs to step back in, it can at any time, and we can always switch course and work with the anger instead.
Okay.
Okay. Do you feel that first sensation? Are you connected with that?
Right now, yeah.
Okay. Just kind of sit with it for a little bit and see if anything pops up, any emotions, colors, if it has anything it wants to tell you. Don't think about the answer, just let it arise.
It's just there. It's like no visual.
That's okay. You can still feel it though?
Definitely.
Can we ask it if it has a job?
When I asked it if it was protecting me right now, I got a very vivid, real sensation in my back.
Where is that one located in your back?
Right along my spine.
So that one, we have another one here present as well that might be protecting you also. Which one feels more prevalent right now?
The one in my rib.
The one in the rib, yeah. So you asked it if it's protecting you, and it showed you a different part. It's possible it's protecting another part back there. Just like sit with it a little bit more.
I can tell you that at the moment right now, I feel a tremendous amount of sadness.
Where do you feel the sadness?
My eyes feel like they want to leak.
Yeah. How are you feeling towards the sadness?
Embarrassment currently.
That's okay. All emotions are welcome here. Where do you feel the embarrassment?
My body seems to be warming up.
Did the embarrassment cut off connection with the sadness?
Yep.
Yep. Here it is. It's protecting you. Yeah. What's feeling most present right now?
The warmth within my body.
Let's just sit with that for a minute. See if that one has any messages.
And maybe this is interesting, but I don't feel that tightened balloon right now.
It is interesting. Do you usually always feel it?
Most often.
Yeah. Something's shifting. What's happening now?
My body's starting to cool down a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, we just got to meet a bunch of different parts, all of them popping in.
It feels that way.
Who's most present right now?
At the very moment, they all seem to be quiet.
Yeah. It also is sometimes hard when we're on a public space. Yeah. Well, can we just take a minute to thank all of those parts that popped in that we interacted with today?
I'm going to do that from my CEO level here.
Yeah.
And through the windows.
Just send them appreciation if that feels right to you. Did they have a message? Did someone have a message for you?
I told them I would make peace with them.
Yeah. So we'll be back. Make sure you come back and check in with them. I would love to do this with you off podcast if you want.
Yeah, that'd probably be a little better. Thank you.
Yeah. So that was just a little snippet of kind of like the way that you would interact with them and how you identify them, how you feel them in the body. Isn't it interesting how they can send you messages? Did you feel that, right?
Very much so. Like, yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, Ryan could probably see sweat coming from behind my ear. Like, and that was not from being nervous on the podcast, clearly. So that's a real feeling.
Do you feel the balloon right now?
No, not nearly. Like, no.
Yeah, that one probably just spending some time with that one. And that one sounds like it has some important messages, which, I feel like some parts can be more shy than others. So sometimes I do some of my deepest work just with myself alone, where they can have the space and energy to, do whatever it is that they need to do. And other times it's helpful to like work through it in a therapeutic setting.
I think one of the things that just really hit home with me, and I hope maybe I can hit it home with the audience and tell me what you think about this, but like when I had that breathwork experience and all subsequent, real intuitive or interesting breathwork experiences or even meditations, my original coach was like, just go with it. Right? Just go. Like if that's what comes through the mind, then go with it. And don't say that that's wrong or stupid or not supposed to be there, right? And then Ryan told the story about when we were talking about, I think we were talking about like archetypes, and we were talking about, I always forget his name, not Freud, Jung, right? The guy that was like, Jung was trying to do some subconscious work with him, and he like would come in every week and he would like tell the story, and then finally the dude was like, I made it all up, and he was like, and the guy was like, yeah. you made it up. Like the you that's in there made it up. So like it's still you. And I feel like for me, like that scenario that we just went through, you know, I didn't make it all up. I just listened.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, and I was confident and comfortable enough with you two to just say it and have it come out. And that allowed you to ask another question, which allowed it. And if I, at any point in time, I could have shut that down.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Like, that's not real. Like this, I do have this feeling, but I know what it is. It's me just being an idiot or whatever the case may be. So I think sometimes, you know, back to this journaling exercise or back to, for the audience, like, just go with it and see which words you choose to use and see what feelings come up. And then and I think that's a huge piece to moving forward.
Yeah. And we just dipped like a fingertip in. We didn't even, right? It's just kind of starting to just feel different parts popping up. And we didn't really, you know, connect too deeply with any of them. But now you have a more awareness of where some of them live that might require some of your attention.
Well, thank you. Thank you for today and for the knowledge.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you for the analogies.
Yeah, of course. I love it. I would actually hope to do like a little takeaway for the people listening in regards to how we can kind of take the information from today and kind of bring it to your everyday. Because I think that it seems to me, even from your example, Alysha, you know, some of the things that you shared about yourself is that it seems like coherence can be trained in some sense, that the parts of our minds, the parts of our self can more efficiently synchronize.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes work,
Mm-hmm.
right? And this is where I think some of this kind of work happens, is that you have to train that coherence, because we've trained it out of ourselves for so long. You know, we've had parts louder and managers kind of like managing too hard for so long. And I think even just using what we saw just then was, you know, you want to slow things down, you know, because urgency ruins coherence in some sense. If you need to, if taking the business analogy, if there is a decision to be made, yet all the workers are saying, you got to make this now, you have to make this now, the director has too much pressure to like actually take in the information, make a rational decision. And so urgency seems to me like not a great thing. And so if we can train ourselves to move a little bit slower, do our breath work, right? You know, that's a big thing. And we talk about all the time about how, you know, if things are feeling kind of like anxious, you're feeling kind of stressed, the utility in just a couple deep, long, slow exhales. I mean, it is unbelievable. And that's literally slowing your body down, and it can be helpful, even from like a neurobiological perspective. If some of these parts are represented in brain structures being too activated, too high energy or triggered essentially, then a slowing down of the respiratory system can effectively slow that down, right? And so something to consider. It's perhaps why when we wake up, most of us aren't necessarily super anxious right the second that you wake up. It's because it takes time for the brain to kind of come online and actually like get into those beta waves that are like a little bit more faster. And so breathing, journaling maybe can help you slow a bit down. Any other tips in terms of like actionable takeaways?
Yeah, I love how you mentioned the slowing down, because it's huge. And if I'm coaching IFS, that's probably the slowest you'll ever see me be, because it was hard at first for me to slow down. Ground, core, field, focus, and heart. Yeah. Whatever speaks to you that kind of gets you to pause and connect within your body and be really, really present. That's what you want to do. I mean, it even can be like dancing around, like for presence and such. But like, yeah, things that you can do on a typical day. Just pause, slow down.
I think you guys both saw me do it right there.
You did, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
That's because I know that's what gets me to focus on my internal world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Those couple slow breaths, small breaths, and I wasn't even all the way there. I could have taken longer to breathe and really listen. But yeah,
Perhaps a conversation or journaling is going to allow the parts to like of yourselves come up. How are you able to actually see the parts if you don't give time for yourself to think about it, to hear it, right? I mean, we had this conversation the other night that, when do you get to think? You almost never get to think if
You're intentional.
Right, unless you intentionally plan it. And hence the utility of therapy or dietitian if you're working on your health stuff is like, it's an hour a week where you can think, you can hear the parts, you could hear you could see your own story unfolding in some sense. And that there's great utility in that. So, taking time to slow down, ground core, field focus, journaling or conversations, like open, honest conversations with someone, I think fulfills the same role, although that would necessitate that you have a relationship in which that is possible, and many of us don't. Even if you have a spouse of many years, that can be really hard to be super open with. In fact, it could be harder than a spouse of 1 year, say, right?
There's more protectors more things have happened.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It is more difficult. One thing also, another for the slowing down and connecting is art. I've had some huge emotional releases with art, not even necessarily more like abstract art, but just noticing parts coming out through art.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Because you're slowing down, you're kind of like disengaging with the busyness, and then trusting that self, that apex window does move slow, and so you can't necessarily make hasty decisions. You want everything to be kind of slow because then all the parts can communicate and gain some coherence and pass the message up, and that's very, very helpful, obviously. And then you can make a decision. And likewise, when it comes to change, is taking that intention from the higher level, the apex window of the CEO. I have the intention to do X, Y, and Z. Sending that down takes time, and it also takes repetition, just as it would in a business. You can't implement a new protocol and expect your workers to understand that intuitively right off the rip. In fact, it's never going to happen. So with an intention, I want to do this, and probably topical because we're just starting the new year. And so I know a lot of people think about that, and I don't, I kind of dislike, there's weird thing now that's happening where like everyone's hating on New Year's resolutions. Before it was like everyone do, when we were growing up, everyone set your New Year's. Now everyone's like, that's stupid. I'm like, well, I guess what I feel is that I kind of don't like people waiting for the first, but if the first comes along and people think about it, like, when else are you thinking about intention? So, in fact, quite a nice time to take advantage of it and say, what is your intention? And maybe you notice, hey, it starts fading around the end of January. Maybe it's because you lost sense. The director kind of stepped out and said, I wrote my protocol. You guys are good, right? No, they're not. They need repetition.
Yeah.
They need reinforcement. And so to like take your intention and make that known, keep it somewhere, write it down, review it daily, weekly, whatever it is. But yeah, other than that, it's super, super interesting to talk about these subjects.
Yeah. Thank you for having me here today. This was really fun.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I love this work so much, and I'm just excited to, bring it to my practice and to continue helping people. Like, since I've started using it, I've had clients with really, I hesitate to use the word resistant, but like resistant to treatment of their eating disorder. And I've seen like huge shifts when utilizing this model because we're starting to heal some of the actual problems like in a very tangible way. So I absolutely love this model, and I'm really glad that you were allowed me here today to talk about it.
Yeah, and I can see that too, because even as we talk about, in our work, a lot of it is, here, please, let's think about doing this because it's good for your health. Eat this, eat that, change this. Don't, exercise 100 hours a day. And people will say, well, yeah, but one part of me wants to do that. And one part of me doesn't trust you or doesn't trust that.
Yourself,
And so, it's just a way of viewing behavior change that is just helpful because those natural barriers come up. It's not all about knowledge deficit. Almost no one has no one has knowledge deficit. We have in a computer basically attached to us, definitely attached to us, if not enmeshed with our brain at this point. So no one has a knowledge deficit, but we do have a perspective deficit, and that is not something that can be taught. It kind of has to be trained in some sense, and so that's where the utility of these kinds of discussions and spaces hold.
Yeah.
Right.
I couldn't agree more. I think I'm really grateful. I the last thing for me before we wrap it up, and I keep thinking about when you said this, part of you isn't got hurt. Part of you could still be an 8-year-old girl, right? I think that for the work that I do, when it comes down to teaching people that it's okay to not judge, right? Like, oh, my mind was wandering. Like, that's okay. Like, that's not a problem. When that 8-year-old girl was hurt, you were an 8-year-old CEO.
Yes.
Right? Like you were tasked with navigating a world that is not designed for 8-year-old CEOs.
Exactly.
Right? So maybe it was you that hurt you, or maybe it was someone that hurt you that you didn't know how to deal with, and you pushed it down. And I think when we talk about not judging and thinking about this part of you, I think people might go a long way to remember that, you did. We all grew up, and at some point we were an 8-year-old CEO, and we were a 12-year-old CEO, and we were a 13-year-old boy with hormones, and that. Like, I can picture some of my line workers, lighting it on fire and kicking and screaming, on their way to work. So I think we just, as we progress and think about this and reach out and ask for help, it's important to remember that we're all human. We're all blessed with this self. We're all blessed with this energy. And we're all blessed that we can reflect and look at this stuff. But remember that you were at some point and not judge.
Yeah, absolutely. Self doesn't judge. It's how you know you're in self. If you're judging, there's a part there. You're not in self.
Well said.
Very well said. Well, thank you, Alysha. Thanks for your expertise.
Thank you.
And then if you enjoyed these kinds of conversations, you want more on this topic or topics alike, please let us know. But other than that, drop us a follow, whatever interactions you got on your platform, because that's always super helpful. And then we'll catch you next time.